Chapter 4. She went early to bed, taking this time the Bible with her. Her strange sensations had passed. They had left her gradually. She had made herself a cup of tea and had eaten a soft-boiled egg and some bread and butter. She felt more normal again, but her nerves were unusually sensitive. It was a comfort to know there were 2 men in the house with her, 2 worthy men, a clergyman and a banker. The Bible, the banker, the clergyman, with Mrs. Barclay and Longfellow not far from her bed, were certainly a source of comfort to her. The traffic died away. The rumbling of the distant motor buses ceased, and with the passing of the hours, the night became intensely still. It was April. Her window was opened at the top, and she could smell the cool, damp air of coming spring. Soothed by the books, she began to feel drowsy. She glanced at the clock. It was just on 2, then blew out the candle and prepared to sleep. Her thoughts turned automatically to Mr. Thorley, lying asleep on the floor above, his threads and paper strips and mysterious diagrams all about him, when suddenly a voice broke through the silence with a cry for help. It was a man's voice, and it sounded a long way off, but she recognized it instantly, and she sprang out of bed without a trace of fear. It was Mr. Thorley calling, and in the voice was anguish. "He's in trouble, in danger. He needs help. I knew it," ran rapidly through her mind, as she lit the candle with fingers that did not tremble. The clock showed 3. She had slept a full hour. She opened the door and peered into the passage, but saw no one there. The stairs, too, were empty. The call was not repeated. "Mr. Thorley," she cried aloud, "Mr. Thorley, do you want anything?" And by the sound of her voice she realized how distant and muffled his own had been. "I'm coming." She stood there waiting, but no answer came. There was no sound. She realized the uncommon stillness of the night. "Did you call me?" She tried again, but with less confidence. "Can I do anything for you?" Again there was no answer. Nothing stirred. The house was silent as the grave. The linoleum felt cold against her bare feet, and she stole back to get her slippers and a dressing-gown, while 100 possibilities flashed through her mind at once. Oddly enough, she never once thought of burglars, nor of fire, nor, indeed, of any ordinary situation that required ordinary help. Why this was so, she could not say. No ordinary fear, at any rate, assailed her in that moment, nor did she feel the smallest touch of nervousness about her own safety. Was it, I wonder, a dream? She asked herself as she pulled the dressing-gown about her. Did I dream that voice? When the thrilling cry broke forth again, startling her so that she nearly dropped the candle. "Help! Help! Help me!" Very distinct, yet muffled as by distance, it was beyond all question the voice of Mr. Thorley. What she had taken for anguish in it, she now recognized, was terror. It sounded on the floor above. It was the closed door, doubtless, that caused the muffled effect of distance. Miss Speke ran along the passage instantly, and with extraordinary speed for an elderly woman. She was halfway up the stairs in a moment, when, just as she reached the first little landing by the bathroom and turned to begin the second flight, the voice came again. "Help! Help!" But this time with a difference that, truth to tell, did set her nerves unpleasantly a-quiver. For there were 2 voices instead of 1, and they were not upstairs at all, but were below her in the passage she had just that moment left. Close they were behind her. One, moreover, was not the voice of Mr. Thorley. It was a boy's clear soprano. Both called for help together, and both held a note of terror that made her heart shake. Under these conditions, it may be forgiven to Miss Speke that she lost her balance and reeled against the wall, clutching the banisters for a moment's support. Yet her courage did not fail her. She turned instantly and quickly went downstairs again, to find the passage empty of any living figure. There was no one visible. There was only silence. A motionless hat-rack, the door of her own room slightly ajar, and shadows. "Mr. Thorley!" she called. "Mr. Thorley!" Her voice not quite so loud and confident as before. It had a whisper in it. No answer came. She repeated the words, her tone with still less volume. Only faint echoes that seemed to linger unduly came in response. Peering into her own room, she found it exactly as she had left it. The dining room facing it was likewise empty. Yet a moment before she had plainly heard two voices calling for help within a few yards of where she stood. Two voices! What could it mean? She noticed now for the first time a peculiar freshness in the air, a sharpness, almost a perfume, as though all the windows were wide open and the air of coming spring was in the house. Terror, though close, had not yet actually gripped her. That she had gone crazy occurred to her, but only to be dismissed. She was quite sane and self-possessed. The changing direction of the sounds lay beyond all explanation, but an explanation, she was positive, there must be. The odd freshness in the air was heartening, and seemed to brace her. No, terror had not yet really gripped her. Ideas of summoning the servant, the clergyman, the banker, these she equally dismissed. It was no ordinary help that was needed, not theirs, at any rate. She went boldly upstairs again and knocked at Mr. Thorley's bedroom door. She knocked again and again, loud enough to waken him, if he had perchance called out in sleep, but not loud enough to disturb her other tenants. No answer came. There was no sound within. No light shone through the cracks. With his sitting room, the same conditions held. It was the strangeness of the second voice that now stole over her with a deadly fear. She found herself cold and shivering. As she, at length, went slowly downstairs again, the cries were suddenly audible once more. She heard both voices. "Help! Help! Help me!" Then silence. They were fainter this time. Far away they sounded, withdrawn curiously into some remote distance, yet ever with the same anguish, the same terror in them as before. The direction, however, this time she could not tell at all. In a sense, they seemed both close and far, both above her and below. They seemed, it was the only way she could describe the astounding thing, in any direction, or in all directions. Miss Speke was really terrified at last. The strange, full horror of it gripped her, turning her heart suddenly to ice. The two voices, the terror in them, the extraordinary impression that they had withdrawn further into some astounding distance, this overcame her. She became appalled. Staggering into her room, she reached the bed and fell upon it in a senseless heap. She had fainted.